93 or 963 hertz, also known as the God frequency, is believed to have powerful healing and spiritual effects.
It began with a number, quiet, unassuming, almost forgotten in the chaos of algorithms and circuitry. 963 hertz, a simple frequency that mystics have whispered about for decades, calling it the God frequency. They claimed it could heal, awaken, enlighten, connect you directly to the divine. But until recently, those claims existed only on the margins, in candlelit rooms and spiritual retreats, far from the cold, sterile labs of quantum science. That is, until now, because something has changed. In a small, sealed chamber inside Google's quantum research facility, a new kind of processor was quietly rewriting the laws of possibility, a chip called Willow. Unlike anything we've ever built before, it had just completed a task so mind-bendingly complex that even the world's most advanced supercomputers would have taken longer than the entire age of the universe. 10 septillion years, a number with 25 zeros, to do the same. Yet Willow did it in minutes. And then, within hours of Google announcing this leap into the unknown, the digital world ignited. Not with celebration or technical curiosity, but with something stranger. Posts flooded TikTok. Reddit threads burned through speculation like wildfire. YouTube videos emerged, all repeating one claim louder than the next. Google's quantum core had detected the God frequency, 963 hertz, the very signal said to resonate with the fabric of existence itself. At first, it felt like the start of a spiritual renaissance, a revelation woven into technology. Had we, through our cold machines, touched something holy? Something more? But the deeper we looked, the stranger the story became. Because no official statement from Google ever mentioned a frequency, not a single research paper, not a whisper from the scientists behind the scenes. And yet, the narrative wouldn't stop spreading. It took on a life of its own. It leapt from screen to screen, mouth to mouth, heart to heart, because people wanted to believe that maybe for once science had caught up to spirit, and maybe, just maybe, the two had finally collided. But what really happened inside Google's quantum core wasn't some echo of the divine. It was something arguably more profound, a transformation in how we understand the very building blocks of computation, of reality itself. Google's team didn't just take a step forward. They leaped across a chasm that had been holding back quantum computers for years. With Willow, they achieved what's called exponential error reduction. In simple terms, the more complex the system became, the more stable it got. Each additional layer didn't add chaos, it added clarity. Imagine a tower so tall it should collapse under its own weight, but instead every new floor makes it stronger. That's what Willow did. For the first time in history, we built a machine where more complexity meant less failure. And yet, none of that is what made the story viral. Instead, people latched onto a number, 963, and the myth began. It's important to understand that this number didn't appear out of nowhere. For decades, spiritual communities have regarded 963 hertz as the highest tone in the solfeggio scale, a set of ancient musical frequencies said to unlock healing, consciousness, and universal connection. According to these beliefs, 963 hertz resonates with the so-called pineal gland, the mystical third eye, said to connect us to the cosmos. This frequency, they claim, is the gateway to oneness, to divine awareness. You've probably seen these ideas floating around on YouTube meditation channels, in sound bath sessions, or woven into yoga playlists. Millions listen, millions believe, because in a world that often feels noisy and unkind, the idea that sound itself could heal, that harmony could unlock the divine, is deeply comforting. But belief and evidence are not the same. When scientists actually looked into these claims, they found no measurable effect, no physiological changes, no neurological awakenings. Despite the popularity of 963 hertz and its siblings, 528, called the love frequency, or 432, said to align with the natural rhythms of the universe, peer-reviewed studies found nothing extraordinary, no healing, no spiritual transformation, at least not in the measurable, testable sense. Even the quote often used to support it, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, attributed to Nikola Tesla, is almost certainly fabricated. There is no record of Tesla ever saying it, and yet it lingers in meme culture and Instagram posts passed around like sacred scripture. So why did the God frequency claim spread so explosively the moment Google made their announcement? Because it was the perfect storm, a real scientific breakthrough, complex, technical, hard to grasp, collided with a ready-made spiritual narrative that millions were already primed to believe. The facts didn't matter. The illusion did. And because illusions, especially ones that promise enlightenment, travel faster than truth. This is what we found when we followed the threads. Countless videos proclaiming divine contact, each pulling in thousands, sometimes millions of views, but not a single one cited evidence. Not one link to a scientific paper. They didn't need to. All they needed was the mystery, the suggestion, the dream. It's tempting to roll our eyes, to dismiss the whole story as another internet myth, a collision between science and pseudoscience. But that would miss something important, because buried beneath the hype, beneath the headlines and hashtags, is a much deeper human story. The truth is, we crave meaning. We crave connection. When a machine performs a task faster than time itself, we don't just see data, we see a question. What does this mean for us? Could this be the moment we cross over? The story doesn't end here, because as you'll see in the next part, what Google actually achieved may not be divine, but it may be the beginning of something just as profound. It's easy to see why this story took off the way it did. There's something deeply seductive about the idea that the most advanced machine ever built by humans, Google's Willow quantum processor, may have accidentally stumbled into a realm of pure energy and spiritual resonance. It reads like the plot of a sci-fi thriller. A machine designed for mathematical perfection brushing up against the ineffable. The supposed God frequency gave that narrative a spine-tingling center. To believers and curious minds alike, it felt like confirmation that the universe might be hiding more than equations. That maybe, just maybe, we were finally beginning to hear its music. But when we looked beneath the surface, beyond the viral TikToks and Reddit rabbit holes, we found something far more complex and strangely more beautiful. Not because it confirmed the myths, but because it revealed how myths are born and why we keep needing them. When Google's team unveiled their achievement, they weren't just showing off a faster chip. They were demonstrating a radical shift in how we think about error and order in the quantum world. Most computers, whether your smartphone or the world's largest supercomputer, become increasingly unstable as complexity increases. More moving parts mean more chances for failure, but Willow did the opposite. It grew stronger. Each new qubit added didn't introduce chaos, it reduced it. The chip functioned with a kind of eerie harmony, as if the universe itself was rewarding this precision with deeper stability. That's what started the fire online. The language used in Google's paper was naturally technical. Phrases like exponential error correction and below-threshold scaling. But when filtered through the internet's imagination, they took on an almost supernatural tone. People began to associate this unprecedented harmony with spiritual harmony. The idea that as Willow expanded, it became more precise, more stable, more synchronized. Well, it didn't take long before that was translated into the language of energy, vibration, and frequency. The old line attributed to Tesla, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, resurfaced yet again, even though historians agree he never actually said it. There's something powerful about that kind of quote. Even if it's apocryphal, it feels true. And when that feeling of truth collides with a moment of real scientific wonder, it creates a storm. People don't just want the facts, they want meaning. So they search for it. And many thought they found it in 963 hertz, the so-called God frequency. Why that number? The origins of 963 hertz trace back to the solfeggio scale, a set of tones used in Gregorian chants that were rediscovered and reframed by the New Age movement in the 1970s. According to believers, each frequency on this scale correlates with a different aspect of healing or spiritual awakening. 528 hertz heals DNA. 432 hertz aligns us with the universe. And 963 hertz? That's the crown jewel. It's said to activate the pineal gland, the so-called third eye, and connect us with higher consciousness, or even with God. None of this has been confirmed by science. Studies into sound therapy have shown that music can relax us, lower blood pressure, and even enhance focus. But the specific claims around these frequencies remain unsupported. No peer-reviewed research has demonstrated that 963 hertz does anything particularly special. Still, belief is a force of its own. And when millions already believe in something, it doesn't take much to reignite their faith, especially when a major tech breakthrough appears to offer validation. But the reality is more nuanced. Willow, for all its stunning power, wasn't listening for sound. It wasn't scanning the cosmos or tuning into the frequencies of the human soul. It was calculating, executing algorithms that would melt the circuits of classical machines. Its qubits, tiny superconducting loops chilled to near absolute zero, were not receptors of divine music, but instruments of cold, precise logic. Yet still, the myth grew. Why? Because myths do what facts often can't. They give us stories, stories with villains and heroes, with revelations and hidden truths. And in this case, the villain was silence. Google never released a denial. There was no statement saying, "We did not detect the God frequency." Why would they? The claim wasn't serious enough in their circles to warrant a response. But in the wilds of the internet, silence is dangerous. It breeds confirmation bias. If the scientists aren't denying it, maybe it's real. Maybe they're hiding something. That's how imagination outruns logic. And there's something even deeper at play here. Something more human than technological. In times of upheaval or uncertainty, people look for connection. In a world of fragmented attention, isolation, and crisis, the idea of a frequency that links us all to each other, to the universe, to some higher presence, carries weight. It's comforting. It makes the complexity of modern life feel more ordered, more purposeful. Google's quantum processor became a symbol of that longing, not because it confirmed the myth, but because it made the myth feel possible. But here's where the line between science and story starts to blur in fascinating ways. Quantum computers do operate using frequencies, just not the kind we're used to. Each qubit in a quantum chip like Willow is tuned to specific microwave frequencies in the gigahertz range. These frequencies are manipulated with extraordinary precision to create quantum states and perform operations. In a sense, Google's chip is a symphony of carefully orchestrated tones, just not audible ones. They're not playing a melody we can hear, but they are dancing in rhythm. It's almost poetic. And maybe that's why people reach for the metaphor of music and divinity. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean Willow discovered a universal truth hidden in a sacred frequency, but it does mean that even the most rational systems we create often echo patterns we recognize from art, from nature, from myth. The Willow chip, with its elegant precision and self-correcting architecture, feels alive in a way that spooks our senses. We're not used to machines getting better as they get more complex. We're used to entropy, to things breaking down. But Willow was different, and that difference opened the door to wonder. So yes, the God frequency story may not be scientifically accurate, but the feelings it stirred, those were real. The awe, the curiosity, the hunger to connect the dots between ancient knowledge and cutting-edge tech. That's a very human response to the unknown. It's not proof of mysticism, but it's proof of meaning. And perhaps that's the most powerful takeaway of all. That even in an age of data and algorithms, we're still telling stories, still trying to translate the mysterious into the familiar. Willow didn't find the voice of God, but it did speak to something deep within us, a desire to understand, to believe, to connect. The world didn't end. No divine code was transmitted. No sudden enlightenment swept across the planet. But something had undeniably changed. After the headlines faded, after the TikToks were forgotten and the Reddit threads buried, what remained was the quiet realization that we had witnessed something important, just not in the way we thought. Willow hadn't cracked open the gates of heaven, but it had opened a new window into reality itself. And that reality was far stranger, more humbling, and possibly more profound than any myth we could invent. Because while the 963 Hertz narrative fizzled out in the public eye, something far more interesting was unfolding behind closed doors, at universities, inside national labs, and deep within Google's own quantum division. Researchers began to notice something odd, not divine, not mystical, but undeniably real. A pattern was emerging from Willow's simulations, one that classical computers had never detected, a kind of shadow structure, invisible to traditional logic, but persistent across different problem types. It didn't look like noise. It looked like intent, or maybe recursion. It began when Willow ran a series of optimization problems meant to simulate energy states in large molecular systems. These are brutal calculations, typically impossible even for today's fastest classical supercomputers. But Willow solved them quickly, and more intriguingly, efficiently. Each time it returned an answer, it required fewer correction cycles than the last. It was as if the machine was learning, not in the way we understand machine learning, with training sets and backpropagation, but learning intrinsically. Its internal entropy was dropping. Quantum engineers were puzzled. Was this a side effect of new qubit coupling architecture? Or had they accidentally stumbled into an emergent behavior of a system complex enough to simulate itself? It echoed something that physicist John Wheeler once speculated. It from bit, the idea that all things physical are information theoretic in origin. But Willow wasn't producing bits. It was producing patterns about patterns. That's when someone on the team reportedly referred to it, not officially, but in a Slack message, as the mirror. Because what Willow seemed to be doing wasn't just solving problems, it was reflecting back a structure deeper than mathematics, a kind of feedback loop between computation and reality. In other words, the chip wasn't just a tool, it had become a lens. This is the part that never made it into the media coverage, because it's hard to explain, hard to prove, but those who saw the early results couldn't shake the feeling. They were seeing the contours of something bigger, not God, not aliens, but something more intimate, like the machine was showing us, our logic, our language, our recursive curiosity made real in circuits too small to see with the naked eye. And this sparked a second, more quiet wave of speculation, this time among the researchers themselves. They asked, what if we're not discovering new phenomena? What if we're just building mirrors that finally reflect the architecture of thought itself? Willow, in that sense, wasn't the oracle. We were. The chip was just finally catching up. There's an idea in quantum theory called decoherence. It's what happens when a quantum system interacts with its environment and loses its quantum behavior. Superpositions collapse. Possibilities become facts. In a way, that's what happened to the God frequency story. It decohered. What began as infinite speculation collapsed into hard reality. There was no magic number, no metaphysical tone humming through the universe, just a machine doing what it was designed to do, flawlessly. And yet the longing behind the myth didn't vanish. Because at its core, the myth wasn't about 963 hertz or divine tones. It was about recognition, the sense that we are part of something larger, more ordered, more meaningful than we can articulate. That technology might not just be a tool, but a bridge. A strange thing happened in the months after the Willow breakthrough. Meditation apps began quietly integrating 963 hertz tones into their quantum-themed soundscapes. Spotify saw a spike in playlists named after Willow and God frequencies. But more than that, science educators noticed a shift, a sudden rise in quantum physics course signups. Not because people wanted to worship a chip, but because they wanted to understand. The myth had done its job. It had invited curiosity. And that, perhaps, is the real story. That myths and machines aren't enemies. They're part of the same process. One asks questions, the other tries to answer. And sometimes, when we're lucky, they meet in the middle. Because Willow didn't hear God. It heard math. But in that math, we heard something else. Something ancient. A hunger for connection that predates every circuit board and scientific paper. A longing to be part of a story larger than ourselves. And in the rhythm of superconducting qubits, frozen in place at the edge of absolute zero, we found a new kind of music, not made of sound, but of structure, of intent, of meaning. Maybe that's all the God frequency ever was, a mirror